my name is Amber Gardner.
Good morning, my name is Carla Ford. Hello, my name is Candace Maskell.
Hello, my name is Alexandria Moreland, and welcome to International Tea by the Sea, where we're going to be having a mature discussion about women in the government and international journalism, social media, and activism. Here we have a special guest today, Ms. Anna Shadagradske. We are so happy to see her, and we're going to just jump right into it. And our first topic, Candace is going to cover.
So we're going to be talking about Russia and their relationship with the United States. I know we kind of had good relations with Boris Yeltsin, but things kind of declined when Putin came into power, especially with the Syrian civil war going on. How do you think this is going to affect our relationship with Russia with this Syrian conflict and Putin's backing of Assad?
You know, when I was teaching here in the United States last summer, one of my former students, but students are never former students, they remain your students, now a very well-known journalist, asked me that question, the same kind of question before real election campaign started. It was pre-election time. What do you think about our election campaigning, he asked me. I told him, you know, I was really scared that there might be the war between our countries. Now, I'm afraid we are going to be very good friends. So this is the answer to your question, because I do not know what our authorities, I mean our, by saying our, I mean Russian authorities and your authorities are going to do. And depending on what they are going to do, what would the people's answer to that, those actions be? I am not a fortune teller. I cannot tell you that, what is going to happen, but we should be really careful in assessing the rights of our leaders.
Yes. And speaking of leaders with Trump and Putin, we kind of feel like the 2016 presidential election may have been compromised with Russian intervention and people on Trump's campaign talking to people from Russia. Have you heard anything on your side that has to do with the election that we had over here in the United States? Do you think that a big role was played?
Well, again, there in Russia, what you asked me can be just gossip, because media did not really reflect what was going on. It does not reflect properly what your media is saying. And because I'm interested in what is going on, I try to deduce from what I read, what I watch on TV, not on our TV, because our TV is unpredictable. So we do not know not only the truth, we do not know the facts, and we cannot interpret what is going on because we are unaware of the information, so-called, we get from our media.
That is so true. And as journalists, our goal is to seek the truth. And I feel like I can't really speak because I haven't been in Russia, but we've seen that 21 journalists have been killed since Putin came into power in 2000. What is the climate for being a journalist in Russia? What can we expect? What kind of risk is there involved?
I would not exaggerate the risk of being killed or wounded or somehow other aggressively attacked.
Right.
I would really be careful in comparing those small, relatively small numbers. But what really makes me think hard what's happening to journalists themselves. They become very careful. They become very scared of what is going on, not necessarily that really high aggression, they are becoming passive in doing what they are supposed to do. That is applied to very many journalists, and very few of them are brave, or maybe not brave enough, but do not protect themselves in their search for truth. Well, it's the majority, and the majority are mostly women, because we are sitting here, and I'm embarrassed that there is not a single male journalist among us. The same is happening to Russia. So women journalists cannot be accused of being cowards. They are not. They're brave. But they are mostly women. Male journalists are usually in some leading positions. They're in management and so on, but they're mostly women. And it is their task to do something that both sexes should do.
And I know, Carla, you have some input on what women can do in journalism.
I think that's very interesting how Russia, that's mostly women that you see at the forefront of these news stories, but here in America, media news is dominated by men. And only 67% of bylines of stories that are written online or even performed on air are mostly done by men. So, what do you feel as though some discrepancies you see, if any, within Russia, do you think women face when it comes to being, the reporters and being the first face that people see when it comes to how their information is received?
Well, I do not think that you should treat our women journalists or our journalists as male and female. In neither in journalism nor in other professions, we have that kind of opposition or conflict or differences. For the reason that after the revolution, and no, not before the revolution, but after the revolution, women could do, your women could not do in your country. And we are aware that once we want to do something, we can do something. Once we want to achieve something, we can achieve something. And there are certainly traces of feminist movement, but it is more the imitation of what you are doing in your country. We do not really need that. What we need journalism as a profession which is practically non-existent, because it became split into PR, into communications, into propaganda, whatever. And journalism as a profession ceases to exist. That is the problem. Men or women, it doesn't matter. But somehow it happens so that it is low paid, and men, for that reason, wouldn't even try to do the job which is not well paid.
Interesting. Wow. So do you believe, and that's interesting that you say that, because in America, women make way less than men do in any field, no matter where you're going into. We make 87 cents to every man's dollar. And I want to know how, and you mentioned that, the journalism field is such a dying industry. How do you think, us as women could, we serve as like the backbone in a lot of issues, but how do you feel as we can do our part and to make sure that journalism field stays alive and stays important to us as it once was, I'm assuming, in the past?
If you are talking about your country and you want my advice, it's just try to be as professional as it is possible in this particular situation, and even better. That's what I'm going to say. whether it is going to be self-education, whether it is going to be learning from smart professors or reading the right books, but don't lose your profession. Don't betray it for some other profession which looks like journalism, but is not journalism. And when when social media appeared, and there were bloggers. I don't know about the United States, but in Russia there were many seminars for bloggers to teach them how to do blogging. I said it should not be done because blogging is good while it is individual something, while it is something exceptional, while it doesn't look like everyone else and cover what other people are covering, necessarily that. But journalism is something that your audience needs, and you are doing that, and the profession has its laws and principles, and it has its skeleton, which is these days getting broken.
Do you all ladies feel that, though, as the media field is dying in the United States as it is in Russia?
Yes, I definitely feel that's taking place because social media really seems to be taking over. If you look at on yesterday, the young gentleman that killed someone on Facebook Live, and that's where the news first broke, and after that, then the other news organizations such as CNN and Washington Post, New York Times picked up on it. But if you were somebody that was on Facebook at the time, you knew about it before anyone else wrote an article or did a breaking news story.
To jump off of that, I think that social media is actually helping journalism, because if it wasn't for social media and like Facebook Live, certain people wouldn't know what incidents are taking place nowadays. So in a way, I feel like it's also it benefits journalism, even though unfortunately journalism is dying due to social media.
I wouldn't just say that social media or journalism is dying, but I think it's changing. Like, this industry is always changing. As technology changes, media is changing. We don't consume news the same way that we used to. And I would say that social media does help with journalism. It's easier to connect to people. It's easier to talk to people that aren't readily available. And it just makes news more accessible. Now people can choose what they want to watch or choose who they want to get their news from, which might not be the most ethical journalists, who might not be telling the truth or might not have the right information. So I think it's hard to sort out what's real and what's not real. But
my concern is the fact of the quality of the journalism being affected, for the fact of if you have someone who really is just looking for viewers, it's not really about staying ethical, staying accurate, about really presenting it in a neutral manner. Normally the people that get the most views are the ones that are not doing a neutral manner, but they're on one side or another and they're just running their mouths. But because some people agree with them, some people don't, they're getting the most views, they're getting the most monetary reward. So it seems like journalism is really taking a hit on the quality of it, just period.
I never said that social media is not necessary. I said that it should not replace journalism.
Right.
Exactly.
I agree.
And while in Russia we did not teach our audience to be media literate, and they take for granted some propaganda that is fed to them by the state-owned media. Blogging is something, even in your country, people are taking with maybe open eyes as something true, but where fake news comes from, it's often from blogging, and the audience is not capable at once to recognize that as fake news.
Right.
And there were many such examples, and for that reason we should be certainly reading something, especially if the blogger is trustworthy, but there may be fake news as well. And then real media, professional media, accepting that and spreading that would be just apologizing the next hour, the next day.
And speaking of journalism and activism, it comes with the risk factor, and it puts on, like, social activism puts on issues about political agendas, and I guess you address it through nonviolent actions and stuff like that. But I guess I would like for you to elaborate on the risk factor in Russia when it comes to social activism.
Again, if a social activist is not a journalist, then it's okay. But when a journalist becomes a social activist, then it's, to my mind, it is something to think about. Because there are journalists who change their professions. They go into politics or decide to become activists. That is one thing. If they continue being journalists, being an activist prevents that particular journalist from presenting other points of view. They would force their point of view on their audience, and for that reason, I think that they should be brave enough to be reserved, not to be that active. But they can be more active in covering something that is missing from the audience when the audience doesn't have the whole picture. But making that journalism equals activism statement, I think we again are ruining journalism as a profession. That's my opinion.
I think it's so interesting that you say this, because not long ago we had watched a documentary on one of the major news networks here, and they are known for pushing a certain agenda. And I feel like news is so one-sided over here, and we have journalists that want to be social activists, but they don't know that they're hurting how they could be presented as like not biased or telling one side of the story. So I just thought it was real interesting that you mentioned that.
Thank you that you agreed with me, because that worries me a lot. I'm like a watchdog, but not for the government, but for journalists in Russia. So being that watchdog, I disappoint them by telling you should not do that.
It's good that you should keep them in check.
So there's a wide variety of like social issues when it comes to activism. What changes do you want to see in the future in any specific topic of issues that you're interested in?
Again, when you are talking about some particular topics or specific topics or whatever, you kind of narrow the field I want to see. Because we never know what we are going to cover tomorrow or later in the day when we get out of here and learn something. It is not, all topics are for coverage. But what is important to show different sides or different analysis or different interpretation of the topics we are accustomed to treating like something we take for granted. Because the world is changing, the situation is changing, the attitudes are changing, and political situation changes and economic situation changes. So journalists should be flexible by telling their audience about different sides of the same phenomenon, not just one, because they are, in their heart, are activists promoting that phenomenon or fact or idea.
I love that you said that. With you saying how it should definitely be something where everything does not require coverage, and speaking a few moments ago on how social media plays such a big part, I wanted to ask you, do you feel that journalism is being led by social media or vice versa? Because it seems as if depending on the coverage of what's being covered or depending on what day it is, it varies and goes back and forth.
Yeah, if you are talking about in general, I cannot judge, but in Russia, you know, at the beginning there were many bloggers, and as every new phenomenon, they attracted the audience because that was something different. That was something not so structured as real journalism. But later on, either those people dropped, many of them dropped what they were doing, stopped blogging because the commentary was enormous and not always polite and not always pleasant. So, and others decided that they might put their efforts into something different, into maybe even journalism. And the state, when the state noticed the development of blogging, they decided to put certain requirements to those bloggers that kind of narrowed their field and narrowed their opportunities for expression. Like if they have many more readers or clicks or whatever you call that, then they should be registered as journalism, but they were never even trained as journalists. They do not know media code or anything, and that's why it's some kind of trap for them. They are not going to adjust to those rules of journalism. I don't think that bloggers, while interested as anything that a good blogger can do, are leading journalism. I think that journalists are being passive and are not developing into this something suitable for the situation.
Yes, this has been a very great discussion, and I would just like to talk about, I guess, any last comments that anyone has about moving forward with everything that was previously stated during this conversation. Anyone can add in.
I think us as women, we need to continue to be, you know, at the forefront of our craft and master as best we can, because we're up against so many things that are always changing, and you know, we need to make sure that we stay on top of our change so we can, you know, obviously inspire the next generation that is to come.
I myself feel that definitely with the fact that technology and social media are not going anywhere, and the fact that they're going to be here whether we like it or not, we learn to be able to utilize it and to be able to handle it in a neutral and a productive manner rather than in a destructive manner, because it's something that's very neutral. It depends on basically how you use it.
Absolutely.
And I feel that I'm really happy that you brought up that point that we chose to be journalists. Like, you can feel how you feel about a certain topic, but your job is to report the truth. Your job is to tell all the sides and make sure that your public is well informed. And then when you're done with journalism, when you put that away and you present yourself as a social activist, then you can go hard for what you really believe in, but you got to stick to your code, your ethics, and just be a well-rounded journalist and possibly revive this profession that we love so much.
And I guess what I'd like to say is thank you for your insight on social media and journalism, and just the fact that we need to know how to separate the difference between the two, and that we need to continue to be credible and, like you said, stick to the truth and stick to the facts. And again, thank you so much for being here. Is there anything that you'd like to add?
Yes, first of all, I'm happy to be here. I'm happy to talk to you. What I heard impresses me very much. And the fact that we agreed, and I hope you agreed not out of being polite, but because you really agreed. But I want to ask all of you one question. Do you know the name Paul Khlebnikov?
Paul, I'm sorry, say that again?
Paul Khlebnikov.
No, I cannot say I've heard that name.
Another question. Do you know the name Anna Politkovskaya?
That's you, Anna? No.
Anna Politkovskaya?
No.
No, I can't say I've heard that name.
Well, very shortly,
Okay.
because that motive of men and women in journalism. Anna Politkovskaya, I'm sure you know, is the woman who, when being a journalist, became really an activist and human rights defender, though she continued being a journalist, and she was murdered. Her name is well known, and journalists know her name. Paul Klebnikov, Anna Politkovskaya was born in the United States, and she was both Russian citizen and the USA citizen. She fought for Russian freedom from the war Russia had in Russia, in Chechen Republic. Paul Klebnikov was of Russian origin, but he was the American citizen. He worked in Russia. He was the editor of Forbes magazine. He was also murdered, shot in front of his office in Russia. And there is a Paul Klebnikov Fund here, the fund that assisted journalism students in Russia by providing internships in bureaus of American media in Moscow. But that was a female and a male with the same fate, the same kind of background, and they were the same age, and their families united in trying to find them assassins, in those people who murdered them. Let's just perceive the world the way it is. They are men and women. They are good professionals and not very good. They are people devoted to their tasks and not devoted. Let's just think that way, and please remember these two names which unite us.
That was great.
Thank you so much.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much. Thank you.
And again, we're International Tea by the Sea, and we just had a great discussion. And again, thank you, Ms. Anna.
Thank you.
Thank you.